It's Steve. Last time we used some custom state logic to handle loading our map data a little bit better and got started on flattening our map data so it's easier to use. This time we'll finish up that process and actually display some tiles. So here this is going to be a one-time run system that simply goes through the list of provided maps and then converts them into map handle IDs. So let's put that in the startup. Let's go into our plugin. We'll add a startup system. For starting to load the maps. And in order to get this data that it needs, we also need a resource. So let's also insert resource. So now we're initializing a new map paths resource for this to use that just takes the string vectors. Now we could theoretically do this all here in the plugin, but I kind of like having it separate. So let's review real quick before we move on to the next step. We have, here we have some structs that should really go up here with the other structs. We're going to call these well, they're all resources, aren't they? I guess I'm going to put this in the miscellaneous structs section with all the rest. All right, let's review what we've got so far. All right, we have a function that starts loading the maps, a function that happens while loading to watch them load and eventually shift the state to done. Finally, we need a system to actually create the map server that we're going to use here. So that system is actually going to take a lot of what we had over here, basically. So I could have left that around for a little while to copy it, but I don't have it anymore, so we're just going to create it again. We need mutable commands so that we can actually create something. So now we have that map handle IDs that we just generated, as well as all of the data we want to coalesce into a map server and a command to spawn the map server. So let's start out by creating a new map server. We're going to iterate through our map handles to put all of those into our tutorial maps. Here's our raw map data. I really should call this raw map data, as well as a mutable objects array effector to store that object data that's going to go into our new map data. So now we want to go through every object in our map data and apply our templates and then our object data override. So what I'm saying here is, let's make this a little bit real by looking into our map itself. Say tile map 1. Here we have a portal entrance with an overridden property of exit portal, which is pointing to ID 10. And if you look at the portal entrance here, this already has a value of 0. So this is just going to be overriding that with this. And that's only if that exists. Let's also find the template of this object. We got to grab the properties out of this template and then iterate through them. So now we have the properties of the template, which I'm actually going to call template properties to make it less confusing. And we also want to iterate through the properties of the object reference. So effectively what we're doing is we're taking the template properties and we're overriding them with whatever's in the object properties. And then we're going to take these template properties and apply them to the final object. So first we need to check if there is already one of those properties on the template, and if there is, we'll just override it. And if there's not, then we'll add it. So let's do that. So here's our two cases. So if it already has this template, then we're going to replace it. And of course, we're going to need to assign, because this isn't just a value, it's a value of multiple. Well, I suppose we can just assign to the object property itself. I don't see any reason not to. So let's do that, rather than assigning value-wise. If it doesn't exist, then template properties push. Now, what are we running into here? Oh, this should be template properties. Ooh. I need to make sure my object property has a name. That's necessary. So where's object property? The public name string, and then that's going to cause some issues when I'm building it for the first time. So let's include a default, and then we're going to need to add this name before we forget. So let's do that now. Figure out where we're building this, which I believe is right here. Yep. Okay. And then we want to set the name to whatever. Let's go look at so it's just going to be property name. Name, expect, can't find name. We also need to make sure this is a string. And we're going to do basically the same thing for everything else. All right, so we've saved the name. Now let's figure out what's going on with this weird bug. Clone exists, but the trait bounds were not satisfied. So object property needs to be clonable too. Yes, that's the issue. Yep, there we go. Now we have other issues. Various strata of issue. Okay, so this is going to be usize, and it's expecting it to be indexed by, this is a pointer to usize. Do I need to dereference the usize? And dereference this maybe? Okay, I'll dereference all the things. Okay, now it doesn't like that because we're using a shared reference and then we're assigning it directly. So this needs to be cloned. Correct. That's the issue. We have built our properties, so now we can use those when we build an object data. Objects push object data. The whole point of this, not just coalescing the properties, but the other whole point of this is to do sprite sheet assets.get template sprite sheet .unwrap.clone, because we're copying it into the sprite sheet here. Oh, template holds the sprite index. All right, because that's a string, I need to clone it. So there's a nice flattened object data, all shoved into one objects array. Now, once all of those objects are built up, we can create a new map and add it to the map server. Also flatten that map into the tutorial maps array. All right, and finally, let's actually use our commands and spawn the map server. The nice thing about this, we don't have to worry about loading it all in our logic because either the map server exists or it doesn't. And let's make sure we add the create map server to our systems list up here. So this is going to go when the loading is done, it's going to create the map server. So add systems on exit map load state loading. There we go. So that should be more or less all we need to do. We've moved our map handles into the map loader itself, making our main function nice and small, while of course bloating the heck out of our map loader. We're at 666 lines, but this we can split out later. We don't need to worry about that right now. We are maintaining our map handle IDs here. We are using these systems to start loading the maps, tell us that we're loading the maps, and create the map server. And now that the map server is created, this should work just fine. So let's run it and see what happens. And there we go. It loaded, sprite sheet, sprite height, etc. Exactly the same as we saw before. So not super interesting, but this is a lot nicer to look at if you ask me. So there we go. The map data is flattened. Finally, for this episode, let's go ahead and actually get some eye candy in here. Load some images, which means we're pretty much going to be nuking this whole setup in a second here. This is going to be done really fast now that we have this set up nicely. For our default plugins, we're also going to set our image plugin to default nearest. This is just something I like to do. It's for sprite work to make it look better. And let's nuke this. We're also going to need, actually we're not even going to need image assets anymore. We're just going to need the map server, commands for spawning stuff. And so we've grabbed some references to our map and our texture. Next, let's make a texture atlas layout. So here we have our tiles, which are 16 by 16, the number of columns, which we load in from our sprite sheet. We know there's only going to ever be one row for this project, and then no padding and no offset. And here's our handle to our created texture atlas layout. Now to simply set the scene, let's make a simple camera bundle. Default. We're going to go through all of our map data and position some tiles. There's the X position. I also created a few constants up here, which probably should be global constants, but since we're using map tile width, it kind of has to be here. But I think I'll probably end up moving these into constants anyway and just disregarding map tile width, because the tile width of the map is always going to be the same, and so is the map size and everything else. I don't plan on doing anything different with those with different maps yet, and we can always support that later if we need to. But for now, this is what we got. All right, and now finally, let's spawn the tile itself. Now that we have the position and the sprite texture atlas and everything else, we're going to be spawning a bundle. We have a transform telling where we're positioned and our scale, and just letting rotation and other things be default. Actually, I don't know if there is any other things. No, it's just letting rotation be default. And we also have a texture, which is a cloned handle to our sprite map, as well as default, whatever else a sprite bundle has, visibility, etc. And also using a texture atlas to basically tell the sprite bundle where to draw on its texture. And with that, this should work. Hey! Now, that looks great. There's one issue, and that is if I go over to tiled, this is actually upside down from the layout we have on our tile map. So, easy fix for that. Let's just flip the Y and run it again. Hey, there we go. Alright, we have some tiles drawn. Next time, we will do some cleanup around here because, like I was saying earlier, these I really want to be constants. And I'd really like to not have to create a new texture atlas layout and clone it here. I'd rather have that already exist in our sprite sheet data maybe, or somewhere else, possibly in our, and we'll figure that out. And we'll probably have time to start rendering our entities as well, which are also on this map server. So that'll be fun. All right, thanks for watching. Peace.